Thanks for joining the webinar this afternoon. We are very excited to have you all on board. We have a great panel. My name is Jonathan Ferris. I'm a senior director with Thomas P. Miller Associates, or TPMA. And the crux of why we came together with this topic was understanding what could be done more with workforce development and broadband. It was something that we were hearing from a lot of providers about challenges they're having finding individuals. There's a lot of federal funding, as a lot of you are aware of, that is out there right now through the Broadband Equity, Accessibility and Deployment Program, or BEAD. And we felt like it'd be good to have a dialogue. We could present out all the information, a lot of it from NTIA, other sources that you've probably seen, but wanted a couple of national experts to give their insights about what they're seeing, what they're doing, some of the challenges they're facing, and then have a chance to answer some questions that you all have as participants. And hopefully there could be some networking and sharing of ideas as well this afternoon. So we have an hour. I wanted to mention one thing. We've had storms come through the Midwest. So we had a third panelist. Scott Rudd is unable to join. He is in Southern Indiana and without power right now. So God bless Scott. Hopefully it gets back on, but he's snowed in right now, so he's unable to join. But I did want to introduce the two panelists that we have, and we'll proceed forward. So Donna, you want to start us off and give a quick intro about yourself? I'm sorry, Donna, go ahead and unmute yourself. Yep.
Always the first thing to do. Donna Ratley Washington, and I'm the CEO and founder of NetRising, which is a managed Wi-Fi company that is just starting up in Washington, D.C. And our mission is to marry the deployment of managed Wi-Fi with workforce development. So that's the mission and the goal. My background is I'm a telecommunications attorney for many years with a law firm, a national law firm, Davis Wright Tremaine, then was at Comcast managing government and regulatory affairs for the Mid-Atlantic for them. And that included managing their Internet Essentials, which if there are any Comcasters on the in the audience, managing their program for low-income folks for the Mid-Atlantic. And then Education Superhighway. So Education Superhighway is a national nonprofit that really can be credited with bringing connectivity to K-12. So when they started, 10% of K-12 was connected. When they finished, 99.9%. And so I managed government affairs and policy for them. And that work was really focused, first and foremost on ensuring that the BEAD NOFO came out in a way that we thought would be equitable and helpful. A primary solution that Education Superhighway promotes and is my reason for being is the ability of managed Wi-Fi networks in low-income and public housing to get folks online. And so ensuring that the BEAD NOFO allowed for that, strategy, that states could pursue that at the same time. And so I left Education Superhighway after doing that work. Again, it was policy, but it was also, I would say, probably 75% focused on going around and talking to state broadband leaders and helping them figure out their efforts under BEAD and the Capital Asset Fund, what to do with all of these, huge amounts of money. If I've got broadband legacy folks in the audience, you realize that, we thought RDOF was, at 20 billion, the biggest investment ever made, and BEAD being at, 42.5 billion for deployment is crazy. And so helping states figure that out. But, a passion of mine and what really became clear to me is that the communities that needed to benefit from BEAD, absolutely from a digital equity perspective and getting internet, also needed to benefit and could benefit other, not just as consumers, but economically. And so that's the reason I started NetRising, and look forward to talking more about that work and those challenges and what what I've seen around the country.
Thanks, Donna. Eric, could you give a quick overview?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name's Eric Leach. I'm the Deputy Director in the Ohio Governor's Office of Workforce Transformation. So our team oversees the state's workforce policy to make sure that business and industry have the workers that they need. And then if they don't, we work with business and industry to connect them with our education and training infrastructure in Ohio to make sure we have a dynamically skilled and productive workforce. So we've got some priority areas between semiconductors, broadband 5G, cybersecurity, computer science, you name it. There's a lot of issues to tackle and trying to get Ohioans the skills that they need for, the emerging economy. And so it's great to be here, and we look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, Eric, maybe you could start. You have a great picture behind you, and I've seen that before. That's your Ohio 5G broadband workforce strategy. So I've reviewed that document and been very impressed with it. So talk a little bit about where you started and where you're at right now through the planning efforts and a lot of the just networking and programming that you've set up in Ohio.
Sure. So in Ohio, the governor and lieutenant governor, so Governor Mike DeWine and Lieutenant Governor John Husted, have been laser focused on making sure that Ohioans have access to high-speed internet. And they were focused on it even before the pandemic began. We were one of the first states to have a state broadband office before the pandemic even hit. And so it's been a focus area for our political leadership in Ohio. And the lieutenant governor wanted to make sure we were going to put in over $200 million in the last state budget. They wanted to make sure that we had the workforce to physically build out the infrastructure. So our office, our team was tasked with finding out, do we have the workforce for this infusion of capital if it goes through the budget process? A quick landscape analysis, we realized, nope, we do not have the workforce. We didn't have the workforce pre-COVID. And the issue was compounding because, the macro level is additional private investment plus state and federal investment plus the carriers rolling out 5G, which they overlap a little bit on some of the skill sets needed. And so you were just having labor crunch on top of labor crunch on top of labor crunch. And so we had to figure out, okay, how are we going to get the workforce in Ohio so that we can make sure every Ohioan has access to high-speed internet while also making sure our business community and our citizens have access to one of the first mature 5G networks in the country. So we started engaging industry. We talked to everyone under the sun, everyone from the Wireless Infrastructure Association to PCCA, NATE, the Fiber Broadband Association, US Telecom, et cetera. And then we also engaged. So we found out from industry, from their perspective, what are the key hurdles and choke points that they have. Using the FCC's Broadband Deployment Advisory Council, the BDAC report was probably like the best secondary source you can find on the workforce challenges. So we used that as a scaffold. We had about 14 interested party meetings with industry, with unions, with 2-year colleges, 4-year public, 4-year private, our career centers, and then third-party stakeholder groups to really figure out what were the common issues each different segment was raising. And so we really found 3 key areas where the state has a role. There are other issues too that, is more under the purview of Congress or industry. But from a state perspective, 3 main issues. 1, we need to increase broadband industry career awareness. No one even knows telecom is a career path for them. They love their phone, but they don't even think about how they get connected and how it all works, or their Wi-Fi. So that's not just in our K-12 system or post-secondary system. It's also in our dislocated worker system. Our Department of Job and Family Services, they're not thinking telecom as like, oh, when we have someone who could be reskilled, telecom is an industry sector. So industry career awareness is number 1. That was brought up by whether it's the subcontractors, the carriers, the ISPs, you name it, they brought it up. Second is we had to build and scale the education and training infrastructure to train Ohioans to do the work. So historically, telecom has done a lot of their training in-house. It was the Bell way. Everyone had their unique in-house training procedures and ways they did things. And so the telecom industry is not like manufacturing, where they've been working with the community colleges for 30, 40 years. So we're starting from scratch. I mean, we're literally, they've never talked to each other. I mean, you're really starting from zero. And so what we did was we first started with, okay, where is their industry aligned curriculum that's industry validated? And then we brought it to Ohio. So we leveraged the Fiber Optic Association's Certified Fiber Optic Technician program. We've worked with Nate to start getting industry aligned curriculum to Ohio and then scaling it, and then working to build unique curriculum packages that don't yet exist. And then the third piece, and this is a very important piece, which is capitalizing on state and federal funding to finance this. And this is an important part because this is finding funding opportunities is how you are, one, going to get the money to even start, but two, to get institutions to say yes, and three, to fill enrollment, because you need to provide opportunities for your citizens to go through these training opportunities at low or no cost. So removing barriers to yes on each kind of link in the chain is how we've used how do we capitalize state and federal funding, going after Good Jobs Challenge grants, which we got $3 million for that, for our broadband 5G sector partnership. We got a $9 million Quest grant from the Department of Labor recently. So we're really, we have our Department of Job and Family Services, and they've got a great team just tracking every funding opportunity that's coming out from the federal government. And then if it's relevant, we put together a strike team that's across it's an interagency group. And we put, pen to paper and put together a proposal. So that's the three prongs to it. And then the last piece is just, okay, you have a strategy, but how do you actually implement the strategy? It's great to have an idea and a document, but how do you actually get the work done? So for us, the way we were going to leverage implementation was through a sector partnership. So sector partnerships in Ohio have a long history. Our state's very familiar with them. So we started a Ohio broadband and 5G sector partnership where we would bring together industry, education, and government to work together on this issue together. And so we had a competitive RFP. The Ohio State University won that RFP. So they housed the sector partnership, but we want the partnership to be industry led. So OSU had a separate RFP for an industry intermediary to come in and lead. And the Wireless Infrastructure Association won that RFP, and they've been great partners with us in Ohio State. And then we've got all the major associations on the sector partnership as members. We've got every core state agency that touches the work on it. And then we've got education stakeholders, our associations that represent community colleges, career centers, public universities, private universities, and then nonprofit groups also represented. So we can work on these issues together. So that was a lot, but that was the quickest way I could just run through it all.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. It is a good story. We can put in the chat a link to the full strategy just so you can get more context behind it. I think the idea about funding is really important. I'll use the term braiding the funding, and how you leverage state resources with federal resources through Good Jobs Challenge, you mentioned the Quest grant, and really working with your workforce partners, the other agencies that are there. So that's incredibly important as you're looking at this, and a lot of the individuals on the webinar, understanding how you can collaborate with those agencies and be part of these efforts, particularly right now, because with all the BEAD planning that's going on, there's subcommittees, a lot of ways that you can get connected with that to kind of get your voice heard about what this is talking about. One thing that stood out about what Eric mentioned was just the whole understanding of a career pathway in telecommunications and broadband. So Donna, maybe you could talk about that, and then also talk about a pilot program you're looking at in Washington, D.C. that really kind of looks at a way to, as you mentioned in your intro remarks, talk about how you're getting access, but also helping people move up economically.
Yeah. So I just want to underscore Eric's point about, the real dearth of labor. I think the numbers that I've heard is that pre-pandemic, we were looking at about 850,000 broadband jobs that the existing labor workforce wasn't going to, it was in addition to. And, Biden Harris have come out saying that the IIJA is going to add another 150,000. So you're looking at, 1 million jobs in broadband that, we need folks to fill. And so there's clearly, the need. And I think Eric also made just such a great point that, aside from looking at the BEAD funding, ISPs already had deployment plans as well. You look at what AT&T is doing with their open network builds and, the 5G. So it's, the partner that is working with me on this is really, he's a for-profit managed Wi-Fi provider, but he believes that this workforce component is going to be a market differentiator because that's the need, being able to train folks. So from my perspective from Comcast, because I did interact with local and state governments in the Mid-Atlantic for years with these apprenticeship programs, and they were great. But those partnerships, I think, suffered somewhat just because the ability to find folks that could meet some of the minimum standards that Comcast had. And so I think the real key for industry is for the states and for communities to have programs that can raise folks up and not just the hard skill level, because most ISPs still have their own training programs, right? But they're looking for folks that they can send into people's houses, right? And so you're looking for a skill set that's not just a technical skill set, but you're looking for, the soft skills. And so many programs, apprenticeship programs, kind of leave that piece out and don't really focus on that part of the work. And so that's something that I know from industry's perspective, historically has been something that's been missing. It's something that I'm very focused on in the work that I'm doing. So I think, what we're all hearing and we all know is this work's not going to get done without partnerships. I mean, listening to Eric's, array of partners that they brought together to do this work is absolutely the blueprint for what folks are going to need to be able to have to do. And so what I'm putting together is a partnership with an organization called Bite Back, that's focused on digital literacy and workforce development. They work out of DC, Baltimore, and they've got a couple of other locations around the country. And so I'm partnering with them. We are layering on this on-the-job training opportunity for our initial projects to their certification projects already, right? And so they've got, A+ CompTIA training programs, which a lot of folks might be familiar with. And so they are layering, the curriculum that we are developing onto those certification programs. And they are thrilled because, what they say to me is, Donna, we take folks through these certification programs. And unfortunately, what they then say is, I still can't get a job because people want somebody who's had on-the-job training. And so we have developed a curriculum, it's a quick classroom training because you are coming with folks who know how to crimp, RG 45. So they've got some of those technical skills, but we're layering on the specific skill set for installing managed Wi-Fi in multifamily buildings. Classes, so 1 to 3 days of classroom training, depending on the levels of the folks coming in, and then the on-the-job training and actually teaching them how to do the work. So we're doing that in conjunction with Bite Back, and also working with another organization. Hopefully, we're trying to get that sealed. It's Project Waves, who has done this work in Baltimore and recently received about $3 million from State of Maryland Broadband's office to expand that work to another 16 facilities. And while the workforce component is squarely within something they want to do, it's hard, right? It's hard enough getting the funding, getting the labor, getting the building, getting just the broadband network stood up. When you then, add in, how do I then create the workforce development training component, right, to bring that in? So the fact that that's what I'm doing is very helpful to them, so that we then can have this model that we can then take around the country. And where we really see the greatest opportunity long-term is in public housing. Really taking advantage of the fact that, a lot of states, and this came from my work again with Education Superhighway, talking to broadband offices around the country, they really see the BEAD funding, and a big opportunity is with public housing. One, they're familiar government to government versus going out into, working with the private sector, but and public housing has a residential employment program. So really marrying that all up is our long-term goal.
Yeah, thanks for providing an overview, Donna, about that. You talked about some of the challenges you've seen with the programs. Eric, I know you all have done a lot of planning, but what are some of the challenges you've seen as you've moved from, the strategy development to the implementation phase, particularly from the education perspective?
Yeah, definitely. I think just to give people context and maybe to be able to visualize it, am I able to share a screen by chance, just so I can show a map? Okay, it's disabled. No worries, we don't have to do it. So we started in September of 2021. Oh, now I'm co-host. So let me just share it so we can all look at the same thing. Can you guys see that all right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, great. So we launched our strategy in September of 2021, and we launched our first program, which was a certified fiber optic technician program. We have now launched 11 programs. All 11 are up and running across Ohio. We started first is to prioritize, like, where do we even start? Like, where do we put them? And so for us, we looked at the state broadband speed maps, like, okay, where do we have less than 50 megs? That's definitely where dollars are going to be flowing. And so we started in Southeast Ohio to start with. And so we started with fiber optic technician programs. We've got 5 of them. We've got 3 tower technician programs. So the tower techs they go up and maintain the current cellular network, but also with small cells, they're deploying those, and then fixed wireless as well. And then we've got 2 5G readiness programs. So adding in the 5G component, working with our ISP partners with 2 universities, and then also an in-house training program that we developed in partnership with our local telecom employers called the Broadband Infrastructure Training Program, which is designed to support both ISPs and their contractors. So they'll get both fiber and cabling skills, so that what we want to do is create broad-based training so they could fill in multiple roles. Because what we're finding is one of the biggest challenges, at least in Ohio, is that if you're writing notes today, this is probably some of the most important things to just jot down to be aware of. One is instructors. That is going to be number one, the hardest challenge you will get. We wanted to launch our tower technician programs, within a relatively quick time frame. We got the equipment, we had the curriculum from industry, everything was good. We even had students reaching out wanting to participate in the program, but we couldn't get qualified instructors. The reason is because the labor crunch is so tight right now. They're making way too much money in industry. And even if you're partnering with industry partners, they'll tell you up front that, well, yes, we'll work with you, we'll get you an instructor. But when rubber hits the road, they're like, well, I need Johnny. I need Johnny we've got a big project. I can't give you Johnny. I'm like, well, if you just give us Johnny part-time, we can make you 8 little Johnnies. But the short-term needs and necessities tend to kind of overwhelm or outweigh the benefits of something that's 12 weeks away as far as new green recruits go. So just something to pay attention to. Instructors are going to be the hardest roles to fill. And in some of these programs, you can't do train the trainer. So you can't do train the trainer for tower technicians because it's a dangerous occupation. So you really need someone who's been in the field, has multiple years of experience. Fiber optic technicians, it's one of the most important programs to have. And if you have a good career tech faculty staff on hand that's good with their hands, you could do train the trainer with that, get them out in the field for a little bit, get them familiar with the industry, and they can teach the technical skills. But qualified instructors, number one. Two, recruitment is really hard right now, just because every industry is hurting for workers. Doesn't matter what it is. Fast food, retail, manufacturing, robotics, you name it. We don't have enough workers, period, in pretty much every state. So recruiting is going to be really hard. So you're going to have to really think through, how do you market and cut through all the other programs that are trying to compete for a dwindling amount of potential students. And then third is what I call the handoff problem. So let's say you solve your instructor problem, you solve your recruitment problem. Okay, great. Now you're producing graduates and completers. The next big hurdle is the handoff problem, which is they complete, but they're not necessarily directly going into employment. And I think part of that is it's partly just industry business. They're not used to having such a tight labor market. They're used to just like, here's our website link, go apply. If you want to get talent in this labor market, you're going to have to be a lot more hands-on and hand-holding. And it's just the way it is. And so what we're finding is there's a problem of employers know of the programs and they're interested, but we have to better facilitate, how do we get program completers into entry-level roles? So those are just three big things just to always be cognizant of as you're planning and going through implementation, because they will pop up and they're relatively tricky to solve.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. We have some questions coming in. We'll address those once we get through more discussion with the panel. So thanks. If you have more, please put them in the chat. Don, anything else to add from your perspective? I think one thing is kind of that handoff piece. Be kind of interested in your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think that's, certainly where I see that's the opportunity that, I'm going after, right? Is, there are these training there, I don't know many states that are as thorough, maybe Louisiana, but as thorough as where Ohio is on workforce, and marrying that with the BEAD opportunity. But I think I think that is the huge opportunity that I'm going after, and I think that is out there is, okay, so we've got these training programs, and then how do we then connect those workers to the managed Wi-Fi community? And so, Eric, I thought your inclusion of contractors was just, so right on the money, because, the general public doesn't really realize, I don't think, the extent to which the telecom industry uses the contractors, right? I can't remember the split, nor would Comcast want me to talk about the split, but the employee versus contractor ratio it's huge. And so really going after, you've got companies in Washington, probably like 2 or 3 that do the contracting work for all of the telecom companies in DC. And that's not, something we normally think about. We always normally go right to thinking about the ISP. So really looking when you're talking about marrying your workforce development training programs with work opportunities, really going after that contractor segment and creating those relationships locally, statewide, and nationally, I think is key to what you're going to need to do. And so I think the other thing is, when you talk about where you're going to find workers, one thing I've been really focused on is this concept of the hidden worker that, I think nationally the labor, what the Bureau of Labor says, we've got about 9.5 million unemployed folks. Well, Harvard put out a study in 2021 and said it's more like 27.5 million, because what the Bureau of Labor Statistics identifies someone as unemployed if they are actively looking. So they count them if they're actively looking, and that's doing resumes, interviews. But you've got folks who are missing hours. They want more time. They've got a part-time gig, but they want more, or who are not actively looking, or who are not looking at all, who are not actively looking under the definition of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but are open for employment opportunities. And when you look at some of the research about these hidden workers, right? These are the historically economically and educationally disadvantaged communities. But when you look at what employers who are hiring from these communities, the results that they're getting are phenomenal. And in terms of the productivity, the quality of craftsmanship, the work ethic, it's, I think the statistics I've seen is they're like 66% of employers rate them at the top of the scale, folks who are focusing on hidden workers. But I think the way to find, hidden workers is by working with nonprofits. And that's certainly a strategy that I'm employing now with my partnership with Bite Back. But there's organizations all around the country that are focused on those hidden workers and really, seeking out those partnerships. So
I just want to actually tag on to something Donna just said, which I think is absolutely critical, which is partnering with the nonprofit community, especially those who are working with underrepresented or minority individuals across states. So part of what we have done with the $9 million in Quest funding. So what we've realized in Ohio is we can't centrally plan this. Like we're using the sector partnership to develop the programs, get it ready for distribution, but all of the work needs to be really locally led. And so what we're doing in Ohio is we're taking our economic development map. They're called Jobs Ohio regions, and we're creating nodes in each region. So we're going to create a system in each local region where we have a 4-year university that's partnered with a community college, a local workforce board, and a local community action agency together to create a system within a region so that we can get programming distributed across the region. The 4-year university is going to lead, is the lead applicant, partnered with the 2-year and the local workforce board and the community action agency. And so what the goal is to get these entities as up to speed as our sector partnership on what's going on so that they can be the regional leaders working with their local telecom companies to make sure that they're getting the talent that they need. And then also distributing out education and training programs to career centers, school districts, other community colleges, other universities in the region, and then also doing career exploration and awareness efforts at all the K-12 districts, getting internships, things of that nature. And the community action agency part, which is kind of the wraparound services part, is so important. So what they're going to be doing is providing the wraparound supports to individuals who need transportation, childcare, things of that nature that are the typical barriers that would prevent someone from going through a training program and reskilling and upskilling, especially if it's full-time. If we want to be quick to market, it needs to be full-time, and then we need to make it easy for them to say yes. So we're providing scholarships, 100% tuition through the local workforce boards that will be part of this. So people can go through at no cost, have transportation, childcare, all taken care of. And then having the workforce boards partner with the institutions. So we know who's completing. and then using the workforce boards and their career staff to make sure they're getting placed. So everyone has a specific role, and we have to create a system where everyone's talking, because as those that are in state government or federal government or associations, we all understand that like everyone's siloed and we're not all talking. We may be working on similar things, but we're not working together. And so through this $9 million, we're trying to force this system to be created so that we can have individuals flowing through it, and they have no idea that to them it's all back end stuff. They just know, oh, I went into my local Ohio Means Job Center, and they think I should go to this training program at my community college, and then they're going to help me get transportation, a bus ticket, whatever it may be, my child taken care of, and then I'm placed in a job. And they think it's just one system, and that's how it's got to be. Versus, oh, you need to talk to Peggy over here, and then Diane over here, and then someone's got to do your WIOA eligibility and financial aid. Here's a FAFSA. We're trying to make it simple so that individuals can say yes. So just wanted to tag on that. Working with the nonprofits is going to be extremely important.
Yeah, and I would add that that's part of our protocol is that we are paying the trainees to go through the classroom and the on-the-job training aspects of it, and as well as a stipend, because that's key to folks being able to go through and do this. I think one thing I'd be interested in as well from Eric's perspective is, one challenge that I think is really out there, and I know NTIA has certainly identified it, is what happens in rural communities where, you're going to, that's where, certainly that's how the dollars are going to flow mostly to rural communities, right? Because that's where you're going to meet the unserved definitions first. And, while, when you think about the workforce need of building out these networks, you've got sort of the design, permitting, and planning, but then you've got the last mile deployment. And so that's where you need all the fiber splicers, the installers, right? But then you also need the construction folks, right? So the excavators, the folks that can do some of the tower work. And so, thinking about, well, are you going to have that design and planning workforce in rural communities? And is that something that you really need to think more regionally about to bring those workers and that skill set to rural communities? And then, again, the middle piece where you think about, the fiber splicers, the last mile deployment. And, one thing that, we're really thinking about is the ability of folks who work on our projects to stay in the telecom industry and, build all that out. But then the adjacent industries, construction, I mean, there's a lot of, synergies there in the skill set. And that's certainly what we think of as part of the overall, workforce opportunity here with BEAD, that, we can train folks up on doing the telecom work, and, God knows we're going to need it, but that there's also, good paying opportunities in adjacent industries as well.
Yeah, I think in particular from your perspective, Eric, just knowing statewide, you mentioned the regional local engagement, which is great, but, as you've been getting into the implementation process, what's kind of the differences that you've seen between some of your rural engagements versus more of your, I guess, metropolitan type of engagements?
So overall, I mean, we haven't, most of our programming has been in the rural areas as of right now. And the main reason for that is just where we know initial dollars are going, at least for being able to access versus the affordability piece of it. So we've centralized, or at least prioritized as of right now, the rural areas. However, we're in active discussions now to get more urban fiber programs stood up. So we've partnered with AWS, Amazon Web Services, and one of our local contractors in the Columbus area called Team Fishel to do basically a fiber awareness boot camp day It's a whole fiber broadband awareness week. The governor's doing a proclamation. And so what we're focused in on doing is promoting this in the urban areas and then finding a location, whether it's a Goodwill or a local community college, to house a longer form training program. And so that's going to be the next piece. So I don't have an answer for that, mostly just because they're in the rural or, ex-urban areas as of right now. But hopefully I'll be able to answer that in the near future.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. And you touched a little bit about just the marketing and outreach piece, some of the events that you're looking to host. One thing that I think is important for a lot of folks on the webinar to know about, and you might know about it, but there's a program called Affordable Connectivity Program, or ACP, and it provides low or no cost internet access to residents that don't have it. So I know, Donna, you worked a lot with Education Superhighway on that. So you might want to talk about a little bit about that and what you've seen for some of the marketing and outreach efforts around digital equity.
Yeah, so Affordable Connectivity Program, it came after the emergency broadband benefit that was put in place during the pandemic. And so income qualifying households, as well as folks who at that point for the EBB, if you'd lost your job or you were income qualified, you would be eligible for a $50 per month subsidy. And so the FCC and Congress followed up on that with the Affordable Connectivity Program, which $14.7 billion at the FCC to fund that, and that's funded at $30 a month for income qualifying households, which is any household under 200% of the federal poverty level. And so that's, a program that's out there. And the FCC just recently completed the application process for dispensing, I guess it's 5 million. I think it's 5 million in awareness grants to organizations around the country to get the word out, because what we knew at Education Superhighway and what most states know is that money's out there. The last stat I looked at, about 29% of eligible households had actually taken advantage of it. And that, is a function of the same reasons why folks don't get online to begin with. They weren't aware, they didn't know about the benefit program. And so that's really the FCC push now to really get local nonprofits and national nonprofits that have a history of working with populations that could take advantage of the funding, getting the word out about that. And trust, right? And so that's why it's so important to work with nonprofits, because so many folks, one, don't trust the federal government program, nor do they unfortunately trust our, wonderful ISP partners. And so getting that nonprofit relationship for the trust aspect of it as well. And then implementation. And so that was something that Education Superhighway was working on, a technical interface solution so that the process of signing up, as you can imagine, for any government benefit program, it's just very onerous. So Education Superhighway created a technical interface that was really user focused to, one, pre-qualify folks, help them get all the documents that they needed together, and then ultimately connect that up with the federal effort so you could seamlessly apply in a more user-friendly way. So, the work I did at Education Superhighway and, again, working with Vaderberg, I think, Peter, who's your broadband guy, but states around the country on, really getting those ACP awareness programs out from a state level and pushing that down to municipalities and localities and counties and nonprofits to really get that going.
Yeah,
So.
and I'll put a link in the chat. There's a map that Education Superhighway has put together just about adoption across the country with ACP. It's some interesting data, and if you haven't heard about it, I think it gives some resources that are available there. So really helpful. We're kind of hitting the last part of our webinar today. So we do have some questions that have been put into the chat. one was asked for Eric. It said, what is the web location to find the map with programs started? What you showed on the screen, and then is it interactive to identify whether training programs are housed? So I guess linking it back with the actual providers that are available.
Yeah, so we don't have the map itself hosted. It's not an interface per se. We've mostly used it for press releases and like webinars and PowerPoints and things of that nature. So I'll find a quick press release with the map and just put it in the chat. One of the things we are planning to do, because we have an Ohio broadband and 5G sector partnership website, which we are in the process of getting into the 21st century. Part of it is going to have a similar type thing where it's the map focus on programs, and then we'll get them linked to where to apply and how to sign up type thing. That's part of one of our implementation sprints for our partnership. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I got it. Question for Donna. What specific soft skills do you hear are needed to incorporate into technical skills training in telecommunications, broadband?
Yeah, the soft skills are that you're going, you have technicians that are going into folks' apartments, so they need to be able to, make people at ease, that they're going to be in there and they're not going to, harm their household goods, and the customer service pieces of it, to be able to explain. I mean, I'm, been in the telecom industry for, longer than I will admit. And, it's still, it's like, how do I get this to, and so the customer service pieces are just huge. The ability to explain and walk folks through how to use the technology is, I think, one of the biggest skills that I think the industry tries to solve for, because you all know that it's not easy for people. You're dealing with seniors who this may be the first time they've had internet at home. You're dealing with folks who've and certainly as going forward, and as all this funding is coming out and we're starting to get these new connections, I mean, you're going to deal with folks who've not been having this technology, and so the ability to really explain it in a the simplest way possible, I think is huge, and that opportunity. And so I think partnering with nonprofit organizations that have that history, that have that experience with underserved communities, and helping them to bring folks along in that way, I think will just be a tremendous need.
Thanks, Donna. Question for Eric, just how you've done recruitment in rural areas for programming. What have you, I think, found successful for that, and what have been kind of the strategies you've taken there?
Sure. So it's a mix of working with our education training partners. So typically we're working with like an Ohio Technical Center, which is like adult career centers. So working to identify graduating seniors from high schools that aren't going off to college, and getting if they have no plan their spring semester and their graduation year, if they have no plan, then we're putting them through this training, that type of thing, because you have a great opportunity for short-term training and making a good wage, and students have found that as a receptive option. Also, our Department of Job and Family Services is constantly monitoring when there are business closures, and so part of their rapid response force to address that will also includes getting dislocated workers quickly into these programs. So that's a big piece of it. As we unlock this additional Quest funding, we've set aside dollars for statewide and targeted advertising. So the next phase is going to be working with the institutions to do specific program related advertising on social media, digital advertising that's branded to their institution and program. We've got some other pilots that are not related to this specific strategy that has seen good outcomes, and it's more about how do you triage the leads coming in and making sure that they're enrolling. So that's going to be the next phase of it.
Thanks. One follow-up, just some details about the fiber optic technician training program. Is it a certificate or a degree program? And then does it have a work-based learning component?
Yeah, so it's a certification. So in Ohio, we have what we call credentials. Under credentials are either certificates or certifications. This program is a 40-hour certification. So you learn all the technical skills, and then the FOA, the Fiber Optic Association, administers the third-party exam. And if you pass the competencies, then you're certified. For that one, there's no work-based learning component integrated already. However, what we're trying to do is work with local telecom employers to do work-based learning, so job shadowing, internships, that type of thing, while students are in the program. And then someone asked about numbers, if I remember, how many people have gone through it. Oh yeah.
Yeah, specifically to Southeast Ohio, but I think Southeast Ohio statewide, what you've seen.
Yeah. So as I answer this, I'm going to just set the table as an explanation. So we have 5 total fiber programs. 4 of them are sharing one set of equipment. So they came up with an innovative plan of they'll rotate the cohorts among 4 schools so we can get more coverage in the Southeast Ohio region. So between the one program that we started with, they've enrolled since they started in September of 2021. Their first cohort was in October of 2021. They've enrolled 37 students, 24 students completed. So it's about a 65% completion rate. And of those that completed, 20 passed the certification. So it's an 83% passage to the certification rate. We're obviously going to continue to work to increase those numbers, but they've had 5 cohorts. And then our group of 4 institutions have had 2 cohorts. A total of 12 students go through, 100% completed, and 83% passed the certification. So that's the kind of numbers we're looking at. Overall, across all 11 programs since we started, we've enrolled 215 students, and we've had 83 completions and 76 passing certifications. The 215 to completion numbers also includes students who are in current cohorts, so they haven't finished yet. And so we're looking forward to continuing to track the progress. So it's all about scaling. You know, we started with 1 program, we're at 11. Now we need to scale and make sure we're getting students to pass the certification and then enter employment.
I have one follow-up for Eric and then a question for Donna. Somebody asked just about the funding of stipends for participants and how you secured funding for that.
So it's less like direct cash stipends and more about covering specific incidentals. So, for example, transportation, childcare, things of that nature. So if they're WEO eligible, well, we can pay for work boots, so all their PPE, equipment related costs, textbooks, then leveraging the Quest funding with the community action agencies, we can cover transportation, childcare, things of that nature. So it's all about finding the right federal program that has the right guidance and allowability for what you're trying to do, because for instance, WEOA can't be used to supplement wages for incumbent workers, especially. So you have to make sure you're finding the right program that has relatively wide latitude on how you can expend the dollars. And that's how we do it. So the community action agencies, their funding that they're getting is specifically allowable to cover these types of wraparound services. It was kind of a long-winded way to explain.
No. It's
federal government is complex, and you really got to read the program guidelines and what funding's eligible for.
Yeah.
I think one thing that stood out for me with what Eric, when you said it's 40 hours a week, I was like, yes. I mean, so many times you're seeing these certification programs 9 months, and it's like, okay, they don't need 9 months. And they're going to drop out, and 40 hours a week I think is just absolutely right on the money, and it's the kind of training that I think industry would really appreciate.
So the 40 hours is pure technical, so you're just getting someone enough competency and knowledge to where they don't completely not understand what to do. They at least understand some of the basics. And then obviously they still need to be trained additionally. But it speeds up the onboarding process, which is a big boon for industry. And with our broadband infrastructure training program, which is more comprehensive, it's 155 hours, but that includes cable, fiber, OSHA, safety certifications, things that they'll need for employment, on top of, as you mentioned before, Donna, customer service and just social skills, social skill development, how to work with frustrated customers, and then also just basic mathematics and understanding how to read blueprints and things of that nature, so that they're as close to being ready to go out in the field as you can, knowing that they still need to do shadowing and ride with someone more experienced for a while.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
The
a
basic
question we had,
you can't underrate the basic mathematics piece of it.
Yeah.
Historically, that'd been a big problem for industry.
Yeah. Donna, somebody asked about engagement with youth, really how you could get them aware of career opportunities and even understanding what it might take to get into an apprenticeship program. So we've done a lot of work in manufacturing. I know some of this is just getting picked up, but have you seen anything with apprenticeship programs trying to get back into that K through 12 space?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a focus that I have. DC has it's called the DC Infrastructure Academy. And so that's really focused on that opportunity youth group, 17 to 24-year-olds who are not necessarily college bound and who are unemployed. And so I think focusing on partnerships, that's the strategy that I'm using, focusing on partnerships with nonprofit organizations that are laser focused on, opportunity youth, I think is key. I mean, when I first, started thinking about this opportunity, it was like, wait a minute, this is a no-brainer. You've got jobs that are paying, I think the average Glassdoor says the average salary for a cable tech is about $58,000, no post-secondary experience, no post-secondary education required. I mean, that's tailor-made for opportunity youth and for building those partnerships with organizations that are already trying to serve those youth. And so that's the strategy that I'm using. And I think that's, a winning strategy, not only just because that's where the opportunity is for the labor and the workforce, but the greater benefits that we all know come from getting folks employed in good paying jobs, right? You're not then, down the line paying federal and local and state benefits, but their economic contribution, to your communities is that much more.
Yeah, one thing that we're looking at are pre-apprenticeship programs that could be linked to established apprenticeship programs in telecom. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for that. We had one last question, and then I think we can wrap it up. Somebody asked about ROI and for all the infrastructure investments that are being made, what's happening, how what's coming back to communities. I will say that TPMA is building out methodologies around that, looking at it because that's a question that's come up a lot. I think it's an area that hasn't necessarily been fully explored yet, but I do think that having the research available to understand that more will be helpful. And I know probably from Eric, your perspective, the governor's office is probably trying to get some of that information back.
Yeah, as part of partnering with Ohio State, they have an Ohio Educational Research Center. So we've got a team of PhDs that are helping with data collection and analysis. So this is going to be this is a piece of it. We won't really be able to determine ROI, at least on what we're spending to build the workforce, until we get fully built out, and then you have enough throughput to really measure what the cost is going to be versus the return. But it is something we will be longitudinally tracking over time.
Yeah, no, that's helpful.
And those benefits, I mean, I think that's going to be
absolutely
what economic benefits those folks can now contribute to the communities and will contribute. I mean, it's easy to say, well, now we've decreased unemployment by this amount, so we know that our unemployment benefits of are X. But when you then try to look at the exponential impact of folks working, and contributing, that's, you know, that has to be part of the ROI.
Yeah. Well, we're at time. I wanted to thank Donna and Eric. Thank you for your time, your insights, and we will provide follow-up email. We'll have contact information. Any links that we've shared, we'll pass them along as well. Hopefully, this has been helpful, and you know, hopefully, this has been a good dialogue. There's a couple other questions that are sneaking through, but I know we're at time, so we'll try to get those answered back to you. But really appreciate it. There will be a recording available of this, but thanks again. And if you have any follow-up, feel free to reach out to us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, TPNA, putting this together.
Thanks, Donna. Thanks, Eric. See ya. Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.